Hi there. Welcome to Across the Tech Pond, the US European webcast and podcast covering the main technology conferences and events hosted by David Marshall, Neil Hughes and myself, Antony Savvas. We are all avid technology conference attendees, visiting the shows, big and small, that help set the agenda across the industry. In this regular package, we also cover major news events and trends that feed into the shows we cover. In this show, we'll be covering the recently held IT press tour of New York, where we met 7 different companies active in the cloud data management space in different locations in Manhattan. Some of them had offices in New York, while others got the train or flew in for the day to meet the press and analysts from the US and Europe. Before we get on, let's introduce ourselves. David.
Hey everyone, welcome back. If you've watched or listened to the show before, and if you're new, a first timer, welcome aboard. I'm David Marshall. I'm on the US side of the pond, and I'm coming at you from Austin, Texas, and I own and operate VMblog.com.
Neil.
And I'm reporting live from the not-so-sunny West Midlands here in the UK today. I write for Techipedia, Cyber News, and also host a range of podcasts over at the Tech Talks Network, but you probably know me best for Tech Talks Daily. I just noticed what you didn't mention, Tony, there from your intro is we also escaped to Coney Island, but that's possibly something for another podcast, right?
That's worth paying for, but we'll make them pay for it, yeah. Yes, that was a very interesting experience in the suburb of New York. But anyway, I'm Antony Savvas. I write for the Pan-European channel title, IT Europa. I'm also a long-time contributor to IoT Now, and also a feature writer and columnist for something called TechLed, which is a communications portal of the industry. Anyway, let's get on. As mentioned, we're covering the IT press tour of New York, which took place in early October this year. The IT Press Tour is a regular event for US and European journalists and analysts, staged in different locations in the US and across Europe. And it mainly focuses on cloud data management companies, including data storage, data production, data analytics, and increasingly AI processing. No surprise there. In the US, it is regularly staged around various towns in Silicon Valley, where all the money is, of course, and everything else, and has also previously taken place in locations including Denver and Boston. And this time it was the turn of New York again, all very exciting. The Big Apple. The most recent European IT press tour took place in Amsterdam this September, and another European event is planned for Athens this December, illustrating the fact why we're covering this event, because obviously it's a regular one and involves a lot of news, a lot of companies, and we thought it'd be a good idea to take a look at it this time. All 3 of us have attended a number of IT press tours, and we thought it would be a good idea to give viewers an inside taste of proceedings. The companies we met included CTERA, Exagrid, Haiku, Architectctor, and Orto, and a couple of startups based in the New York area as well, which hopefully we'll come to if we have time. So, David, we'll get on to the 2 startups at the end, like I said. But if we have any time, but what did you actually think of CTERA's update for the press and analysts attending in New York?
Yeah, first, love that we're doing this and giving an update on this type of event for people who may not be too familiar with it. The 64th edition of the IT Press Tour, as usual, had a great list of vendors for us to speak with. Up first, in no particular order, but CTERA. They really impressed me with their 3-wave innovation strategy that they talked about during our briefing. Wave 1 being location intelligence, unified file silos across edge, core, and cloud. And then wave 2, metadata intelligence, where added real-time ransomware detection. And then finally, they talked about wave 3, enterprise intelligence, which makes data AI ready through content analysis and curation. These folks at CTERA, they aren't just doing storage anymore. That was kind of one of the big takeaways that I got from the briefing. They're evolving into a complete data intelligence platform. And what caught my eye was their statistics that 95% of GenAI pilots are failing due to poor data quality. And so with that, they basically identified three main problems killing AI projects out there right now: messy data, data silos, and compliance issues. The CTERA solution involves creating what they call curated, high quality data sets that are actually ready for AI consumption. They're also going all in on their MCP, the Model Context Protocol, which really is becoming the new standard for AI data interaction. And then what's really smart is their hybrid deployment model. You can run everything on premises with private LLMs, or you can use public models like GPT-4 to, while keeping your sensitive data local. And for enterprises that are worried about data sovereignty, that's a huge, huge thing.
Yeah, and basically, they have executives in New York, and I think they've expanded their presence in New York because I think the majority of their business comes from the US as well as Europe. I think America's their biggest market, so that's why they were there. What did you actually think about them, Neil? I think you've met them before, haven't you?
Well, as a
Just
man
like
of
David has.
Yeah, as a man of a certain age, I've got to be honest with you. I do suffer with a form of musical Tourette's, and whenever I hear keywords of song lyrics and things, I want to burst into song. So when I hear Satara, I feel compelled to launch into former Chicago frontman Peter Satara's "Glory of Love" from Karate Kid 2. But I won't put you through that now. But I think one of the things I'm picking up around the conferences that we're going to at the moment is a phrase I keep hearing again and again, and that is, without data, there is no AI. And what struck me about CTERA is how they're reframing the conversation around AI and data. And instead of thinking about bigger models or faster GPUs, it feels like they're focused on the quality of the data that feeds those systems. And it just feels a more human and pragmatic way to look at enterprise AI and how it's evolving.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, referring to the waves David was talking about there, when they presented, they were quite long waves, and I was pleased there was only 3 waves this time, because I did make the joke, well, how about the 4th, 5th, and 6th? But we had enough technical information by then. But as part of that third wave on the AI side, they did announce the CTERA data intelligence technology. It's their first major foray into the world of AgenticAI, as far as I understood it, and it's being offered to existing companies as part of their current deployments, but could well be offered as a standalone product through its channel partners in the future, which could be quite interesting. And as CTERA says, its channel partners include Hitachi, HPE, IBM, Microsoft, and Amazon, amongst others. That could be quite a good major boon for them. Would you agree?
Yeah, from my side, completely. But I've got to admit, I didn't know too much about the system, and I'm not too au fait with their product, so I couldn't really go into too much detail on that. But yeah, incredibly exciting for them.
Yeah, I mean, from majoring on a global file system to, getting your data right for AI and processing and storing it the correct way. Anything to conclude there, David?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it, hitting on that note with wave 3. But yeah, I agree, and I think that was sort of that same common theme, right, across everyone that we met with. And I guess, here we are in 2025 heading towards 2026, and AI is not only a huge story this year, it's going to be an even bigger story next year. So to see a lot of these companies who were formerly storage or file systems, backups, all these different things, everybody is talking about AI, and why should they be any different?
Yeah. So another company of the big 5 we're talking about today was Exagrid, who do backup storage appliances. I mean, it sounds all a bit old-fashioned. Hardware. I suppose someone's got to sell hardware, and this is to do with cloud data management. What did you actually think about these, Neil? Have you met Exagrid before?
I haven't. No, it's my first introduction to Bill Andrews, the CEO of Exagrid, and he really stands out because he doesn't sound like a CEO chasing buzzwords. He's just proper old school, straight talking, no nonsense, bit of a colourful character, you might say. But he sounds to me like someone who spent decades listening to customers explain why their backups are failing the night before, and that experience seems to be shaping everything of how Exagrid operates today. And I think one of the the best insights of the tour for me was his walk through the entire storage industry, where everybody's standing, where there might be a bit of convergence in the future. And for me, as I was watching this, I thought, I'm going to get a great article out of this. But we were told shortly afterwards we couldn't use those slides because some of the competitors might disagree with how some of the information was presented. But it was an incredibly useful section, wasn't it, though?
It was, but unfortunately, the PR stepped in and said, well, whispered to him, perhaps that maybe we can't we can't be saying this still. But anyway, we'll come back to that in a minute. What did you think, David?
Yeah, first I agree with Neil's assessment on that, and the things that Bill talked about. I've met Bill a few times. I've done a couple of video interviews with him over the years. So he's an extremely colorful character. He knows this industry inside and out, like nobody I've ever talked to before. So, getting the rundown from him, to me, he's the leading expert. He knows all the technologies, all the players. And one of the things that I found most interesting while he was talking too is within Exagrid's story itself. I found it fascinating because listening to Bill, you could finally realize really how a company of their size can compete with giants like Dell and HPE and do exceptionally well. So it's not like he's coming up against these behemoth companies and his company is struggling. They've had, as Bill mentioned during the briefing, they've had quarter after quarter of growth and positivity. So they're not hurting for money. They're not looking for investments. And so they're doing really well as a company. And a couple of things that from a technology standpoint that I guess stood out to me as well, and then I'll throw it back to Neil. Their tiered backup storage architecture with a non-networking facing repository tier. I think that's brilliant for ransomware protection because attackers literally can't see or access the retention data. The other thing, their new AI-powered retention time lock feature, that's clever as well. It watches delete patterns over time and automatically extend retention policies if it spots suspicious activity taking place, which I found fascinating and extremely useful. So, and the one other thing that kind of did jump out at me as well, and I'm assuming it struck you guys the same way, both from a professional and a personal level. One of the things that Bill talked about was their support system. They're all assigned, every customer is assigned a senior level support engineer. There's no junior techs. So no, level 1, 2, and 3. When you call support as a customer, you get the same person who installed your system, which I think in an industry where everyone complains about terrible support experiences or not being able to understand who you're talking to, wherever you are in the world, you have a person in that area as well where you're at, speaking your language, that knows the system inside and out. And I think that's a real differentiator for them.
Yeah, so many great points there, David. And as you said, they're not looking for money. They've been profitable for, I think, 19 consecutive quarters. No outside funding since 2013. They have no debt. They're cash positive. They've got no plans to raise any money anytime soon. But another point that really stuck out for me was when he said backup systems were designed for a world that just doesn't exist anymore. Predictable data growth, static workloads, and no ransomware. That's not the reality anymore. The reality for enterprises now is almost complete chaos because data is growing exponentially, retention requirements keep expanding, and ransomware hits are constant. But I think most of the failures come from undersizing and poor capacity planning. And for me, Exagrid builds tools that model retention, deduplication, and growth in advance to stop those kind of failures before they happen. And it just reminded me really about how much backup has been undervalued in recent years. And we talk about AI and analytics all the time, but if your data isn't recoverable, none of that innovation really matters.
Yeah. And I mean, like going back to Bill, yeah, I mean, he's good value. I mean, you don't have to like work too hard when you sit down there. You can just press play, and he goes on for like about an hour, doesn't he? He's a relatively small but perfectly formed James Cagney. For the younger audience members, maybe black and white films from the 40s, 50s, and maybe early 60s. But yeah, all he's missing when he stands there and talks like this is a machine gun, isn't it? Really, you could see him in one of those old black and white movies. Look at me, Mum, I'm top of the world. You know
Top
what I
of the world,
mean? And he was very confident about, as he would be in front of the press and analysts, typically about the market. But as I was conveying some of what we heard from him to one of his rivals on the New York press tour, he said, "Oh yeah, Bill's very good. He's been optimistic for 20 years." Which was obviously a slightly underhand comeback there, but yeah, I mean, obviously he's a character, and I suppose in technology, what we're missing in this industry are some characters. So sometimes that actually helps, doesn't it? Obviously, their hardware getting to the point, it supports all the major backup software systems out there, and they're looking to expand that still. And I think there was also news what broke in terms of the channel. They've brought out some new features with managed service providers to allow them to better support their end customers regarding AI backups and also support functions, etc. That just broke after the actual news. We were actually told about it briefly, but we were told we couldn't report on it. But that wasn't the most important thing they were talking about. Obviously, he had a lot of talk about the rivals, etc. But we'll have to talk about that another day, maybe, because we're not allowed to at the moment.
Yeah, and I think what's probably important to point out here is what Exagrid is doing. It isn't glamorous, but it's foundational. They're proving that reliability and simplicity still have a place in enterprise tech, and arguably more so than ever. And I think while so many organisations are chasing transformation for transformation's sake, very often Bill and his team here are focused on making sure yesterday's data is still there tomorrow. And at a time where resilience is becoming the ultimate measure of success, I think it is a message worth paying attention to.
Yeah. So we'll run along now to Haiku, who have been around not forever exactly, but they're a well-established company in cloud data management. They have a big managed service provider story, and they're looking to better support the requirements of AI services, etc. And what they a few years ago, funny enough, on an IT press tour in Silicon Valley in San Jose, they launched this big initiative to actually improve the lot of customers who are using software as a service and don't realize that their workloads aren't backed up by their SaaS provider. And they launched this initiative to get the support for more SaaS workloads on the backup side. And obviously there's tens of thousands of SaaS applications. They don't support them all. No one does, but it's an increasingly important market. That they compete with companies like Veeam and Keep It on the SaaS backup market. And at the IT press tour, their update was that they support an extra 25 plus hypervisor solutions and SaaS backup applications and other cloud applications in their main offering. And they also had something to say about AI and some of the problems around cloud data management. And it might be easier to read some of the things which were reported on. Their head of cloud products, Safia Sankaran, he described the lifestyle diseases of cloud backup, problems that develop slowly but pose a serious risk over time. For example, storage obesity. Cloud backup APIs don't support incremental backups the way on-premises systems do. Fragmentation with different consoles for different cloud providers, separate tools for SaaS applications, and multiple third-party services to fill the gaps in coverage. Organizers end up with console chaos and automation sprawl, Sankaran said. And the blind spots, we've heard about those before, but most cloud backup solutions handle VMs and files well, but with database as a service products, data lakehouses and AI training data sets, these workloads either aren't supported or require manual scripting to protect them, he said. And Haiku used the IT press tour to publish some new research in front of us. Organizations using over 200 SaaS applications experienced breach rates of 77% over 3 quarters, but those running less than 100 SAP apps saw a breach rate of 60%. Still bad, but a slight improvement. But you're doing less work. That's not any big surprise there. Effectively, a greater number of apps created a wider attack surface. And obviously, enterprise are using more and more apps these days because people are saying, use apps. Don't use big monolith platforms, what can be easily attacked, because that's a single target. If you use the apps, you spread the risk. That's the theory. But it's typical. You use more apps and you're opening up other dangers here. And you become maybe a wider target, but in a smaller way. But nevertheless, you still could be facing fines for losing people's data, etc. So, and Haiku trumpeted its partnership with the Dell data domain platform using DD Boost technology, which provides deduplication at the source. Haiku claims 40-to-1 deduplication ratios in real customer environments. So, David, what did you get from Haiku?
Yeah, a couple things. This is one of a couple of different times that I've got to see them on the IT press tour, and I've talked to a number of their executives over video interviews on VMblog quite a few different times. I did enjoy last year. Just as a side note, we met them at the one in Boston at their headquarters, and I was just going to quickly add. Two things were greatly missed from this one that we saw at the other one. One, talking about characters, when we were talking about Exagrid, another CEO, Simon Taylor of Haiku, is another one of those characters who you could just sit there and listen to for an hour talking about whatever. He's very knowledgeable about the company, the technology, the industry. He's written a book on it. And he's just another one of those fun people, CEOs, where it's not death by PowerPoint, where you could just have a briefing with him, come away educated, entertained. He has, like Bill, to me, he has what they call, since we're talking about the 1914 black and white movie, he has the gift for gab, as they might say, back in the 20s. Not that I'm that old, but
we still use that in the UK because we're still 100 years behind, you see.
The other thing missed, I don't know if you remember too, I mentioned this in the Haiku briefing. They have a goat in their office at the front door where you can take a selfie with. And I asked the executives who were there, oh, you didn't bring the goat? And they said, no, we left that back in the office. And I'm like, oh, that's a shame.
It might get stolen in New York.
Well, that's true. Good point. For me, real quick, you covered a lot of the new big announcements that they made. One thing you talked about it, they announced was their Dell partnership. And I think that's for Haiku is game changing. They now have access to Dell's 60,000 channel partners globally, which is massive. Yeah. And you also touched on this, but what's equally interesting is how they're positioning themselves as an intelligent data mover for Dell's data domain platform. Their integration with DD Boost lets them push data from, I think they said it was over 90 different connectors with an impressive deduplication ratio. So that kind of jumped out at me, the fact, their partnership relationship with Dell.
Yeah. Neil?
Yeah, just to echo what David said there, I too was gutted that their CEO, Simon Taylor, couldn't make it. Incredibly cool guy. I spoke to him recently about one of the overlooked risks in modern cybersecurity, unprotected SaaS data. And he shared the explosion of SaaS adoption, but also how it's created hundreds of hidden data silos within organizations. And he was telling me about that book you mentioned, David, as well. I think it was Averting the SaaS Data Apocalypse, something like that. And
I think that's right.
Yeah, and it was describing real-world stories like the Boston Red Sox discovering 900 unprotected SaaS services and how a company under attack used their solution to recover data instantly and not paying any ransomware attack. So, yeah, incredibly cool guy. I could just listen to him for absolutely hours. And I think with regulatory shifts, and I think it makes SaaS data protection a legal responsibility now for company leaders. So a lot to talk about there. Like these guys a lot, and I'm hoping to be speaking to them very soon. And listening to your intro on them, though, I've got to say, Tony, I had to go full Alan Partridge out to leave myself a little voice note for an article later of why digital hoarding is adding to the storage obesity crisis. You can look out for that article soon. You've inspired something.
All your idea. And it's no surprise to hear that the two CEOs of Exagrid and Haiku go out to dinner with each other regularly, because I think Bill Andrews was sort of like saying, I don't know if he was saying that Simon owes him dinner or he owes Simon dinner, but I wouldn't argue with Bill Andrews anyway. But there you go, you know.
No, but I don't know who's paying, but I that's a dinner conversation I would love to sit through.
Yeah.
Okay. So running on now, the next company one of the next companies we met was Architectctor. What did you take from them, David? They've been around a long time. I think they regard themselves as maybe the longest storage startup in the history of storage. They've been around a long time, but not many people have actually heard of them. What do you think?
You're exactly right. That's what I was going to say is they've been around a long time. This is the first time I've had a chance to meet Architectctor in person. I've known about the company, I've written about the company, but here we have this company that's been quietly building hybrid cloud file storage solutions to your point, for the last 17 years. And they're solving problems most vendors aren't even thinking about. One of the things they talked about in the briefing, a case study. They talked about Princeton University case study, and that really struck me. How do you build a 100-year data management plan, which is what they're doing? It's not just backup. It's thinking about technology refresh across a century. I don't even know how you begin to do that, but they did, and that was one of the case studies that they talked about in depth. Their media flux platform is managing over 1 trillion objects in a single namespace for one of their customers. That was another key data point that they talked about that kind of blew me away. And then what's particularly interesting in their database-driven approach, they built an XML encoded object database that makes their file system structure incredibly efficient. Their real-world applications are impressive too. They're helping Dana-Farber Cancer Institute manage their data after a painful cloud repatriation experience. And then another thing, they've also built S3 integration for IBM's Diamondback tape libraries. I know we don't often talk about tape libraries. They're not sexy, not like backup or other storage, but tape libraries don't really get a lot of positive air coverage anymore. But IBM's Diamondback tape library has been around forever, and here they are. Architect is building an S3 integration for IBM, and I think that was super cool.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about tape. I mean, on the side there, I mean, I remember going to Quantum Corporation with an IT press tour once, and they was like building some of the chassis units for Amazon Web Services, because Amazon Web Services use tape, don't they, in the cloud to store people's data. A lot of people don't really need to know about that, but some people might be surprised that a company like, Amazon, do use tape to store your data in the actual cloud. Maybe not the hottest data, but some of the lukewarm data and obviously the cold data. It's so if Amazon Web Services are buying loads of tape systems, it makes you wonder, where the market is going with it. Maybe this could be the next big thing. I don't know. Tape.
Yeah, well, I keep reading that tape is making a comeback, but as for AWS, maybe just concentrate on getting those DNS servers right first. But there's a story for another day. But like David, I think this was my first introduction to them too, and I love those examples of Princeton and Dana-Farber there, and how they're using it to bridge traditional storage with modern AI workflows, just proving that blend of first principles engineering, and also I think they were pricing by user, not capacity, and I think those things could redefine how organizations think about data on a big scale. But the other thing that stood out to me that I don't think you mentioned, David, was the media flux platform. Manages over 1 trillion files within a single namespace, unifying petabyte scale data across mixed storage environments without fragmentation and without vendor lock-in. So again, quite cool.
Yeah, I mean, on the last point there, maybe we should, take it from why maybe not a lot of people have heard from them, because I mean, they're in Australia. They're headquartered in Australia. They started in Australia, So that they're approaching 20 years. I mean, around the time of the IT press tour, just afterward, they announced the appointment of a new business development guy. So that might sort of bring, things forward for them. They hired a guy, let me see here. They hired a guy here, let me get this right, Robert Molland. He joined them as Global Business Development Lead. And the CEO, Jason Lowry, who joined us virtually on the IT press tour, ringing in to the rest of the execs there, he said his knowledge of data workflow requirements and experience architecting innovative, highly performant solutions for large-scale enterprise and applications will prove invaluable as Architectctor continues to serve a growing base of customers and partners worldwide. Now, let's hope so. Then more people would have heard of them. So hopefully we've educated a small number of people, about their existence. Now, the last developed company we actually met, established company, was Orto. What did you think about them, Neil?
I think for me, this was one of the most technically fascinating sessions that we saw in New York, because it really did challenge some of the very familiar assumptions about how we move and store data, because they're not a cloud storage vendor. In fact, they don't host or manage anything. They license a distributed file system.
What are they here for then?
My mind was being blown. That's before we saw a 40-minute video, but more on that story later. I'm sure one of you...
42 minutes.
To be exact.
But it's designed for institutions, as they said, that need global access to data without unpredictable costs or security trade-offs. Now, yes, there was a lot of generic things mentioned there. The US Geological Survey, I think they use it to keep natural hazard data available in real time across AWS regions during emergencies. So there were some real-world use cases. I think there was also, I think it was a global bank that uses it for software distribution. And
Goldman Sachs.
That was it. Were we allowed to mention that?
They couldn't actually say it, but it is publicly known.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
Tony figured it out.
You figured it out. I was trying to navigate around saying anything there, but the cat is out of the bag. But I think
it was pure deduction. He didn't say anything he shouldn't have. He figured it out on his own.
And a few things around pricing as well that stood out. They've completely decoupled data storage from costs, so you don't pay by terabyte. You pay by server and by user identity. So in theory, whether you store 10 terabyte or 500 terabyte on that server, the cost doesn't change. And they say it's transparent and predictable, which felt incredibly rare in enterprise storage to me.
Yeah, that kind of shocked me as well. I don't know how that fits within the bottom line of your financials, but hey, good on them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of represents a quieter, more engineering-driven side of innovation. The kind that it's not going to make headlines. It's not sexy and attractive to some of the things that we see, how they're something that grabs all the headlines. But it solves some of those harder problems at the foundation of data-intensive computing. As I said, not for everyone, but hey, if you work in a research lab, government agency, financial institution, and all you care about is a bean counter, predictable costs, strong security, global access, maybe it's an elegant piece of technology. That was kind of what I walked away thinking. Anything
else to that, David?
No, this was again another first time company for me. First time. I don't know how many times they've done the IT press tour in the past. I think they talked about that they had done one a few years back, but it wasn't one that I attended. So this was the first time I've met with those guys. First time I've gotten into the weeds with their technology. I'll be the first one to admit I'm not proud. A lot of it went over my head. I'm pretty good with the technology side of things, but they had a lot of discussion. You talked about that 42-minute video presentation that they showed at, I think it was a recording from a trade show where they did a presentation, a technical presentation, and it went over my head. But I think Neil did a really good job of summing up what some of the main points that I caught or took away from it as well.
Yeah. I mean, a 42-minute presentation. It was originally recorded for a trade show, and I think they said the trade show said it might be a bit too long for the trade show. No shakes.
It was a brave, bold move.
Looking around the room, some of the press and analysts, and I'm not mentioning any names here. I'm talking about unprofessional people in the room. I think it was an excuse to do your email in some people's minds when this 42-minute presentation was on. But the guy presented very well. It was a good, solid performance. But I think one thing we'll take is that it was a bit long. But the company's been around a while. It was originally a purely open source company, wasn't it? And at the beginning, they did actually say, well, it was a good idea at the time, but sort of losing a lot of dollars made us rethink about how we were going to sell this solution and make some money on it. And they described it as a closed wall, a sort of like a closed wall, I think, the offering. They said it wasn't obviously open. It was based on open source software, but it was their closed wall version of it, which they took on. And now they manage that project behind a closed wall, as I understood it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
No silence. I must be right. Okay. when I get the silent treatment, I'll just move quickly on. Yeah, and the two startups we met, they both had offices in New York. We went to them. The first one was TexQL. Now, the young man we met there had a lot of big opinions and a lot of big predictions and a lot of bigger ambitions, etc. It was quite amusing being in the TexQL office. When we got there, the guy who runs the press tour, a Frenchman who used to live out in San Francisco, but he's now back in Paris, Philippe Nicolas. He said, "Well, where are we going to do the presentation?" And the guy said, "Well, what presentation? You want a presentation?" And quick as lightning, he actually did get a presentation ready and he put it on the startup's TV. How did you actually see this one, David?
Yeah, I guess following a theme of first time meeting a company, that's the same case here. So yeah, TexQL, it was an interesting startup. And again, first time I've met. So to be honest, it's the first time I've even heard of them. Where at least a lot of the other companies, it may have been the first time I've met them. This is I didn't know this company. I've never heard of the company. So it was kind of an interesting and fun way to get exposed to them. It was, like you said, kind of haphazard. We didn't have a formal meeting place. We didn't have a formal presentation ready to go. He did eventually pull up a couple of screens and he did give us a walkthrough, a live demo, which a lot of people won't normally do. He pulled up the product and just started typing away and getting suggestions from us on what to type in. So I guess one step back. So TexQL is tackling what I'd say is a massive problem. And the way they described it, right? Enterprise data platform lock-in. And he mentioned a couple of competitors, how, they all do some certain components of it. But once you use them, your data's locked in with those companies. And the company CEO, the young guy, Ethan Ding, he explained how moving business logic between platforms like an SAP or a NetSuite, I think he said, can cost somewhere upwards of like $50 million over 5 years. And that number sort of got my attention. He also talked about their platform and what he called the Rosetta Stone approach to data integration. And I think that could be game changing as AI drives data platform costs from 10% to potentially 50% of IT budgets in the next coming years. One of the tools like a ChatGPT and various AI solutions work well for documents under 10 gigs. Ethan talked about enterprise scale data management and how it's a different beast entirely. So that's kind of where he alluded to where his company was trying to play in that space of the enterprise scale data management. And then one last thing, and then we can kind of go back and forth if we need to, but one last thing to note was TexQL's pricing model. We talked about the other company's pricing model and how it kind of raised eyebrows. Well, one of the things that Ethan said, they're doing a fundamental shift from traditional platforms as well. Instead of charging for CPU hours like most AI instances, their billing is for the compute time during data transit. So I thought that was a pretty interesting differentiation as well.
Neil, what did you get from TexQL?
Well, I think for everybody watching, first of all, we need to describe the environment. If you close your eyes and try to imagine what an office of a Gen Z startup would look like, this was pretty much it. There were cuddly toys. It was like a Google office, coloured chairs. There's a gym in the corner. There's weights, video games, a gazillion number of video game controllers there. Proper felt like an up and coming startup. It made me feel a little bit old, but also
Chairs.
a little bit envious. Yeah, yeah, chairs.
Neil, the one thing it didn't have was plentiful chairs and plentiful conference tables. I had to steal an employee's chair who hadn't gotten there bright and early like we did, and when they came in and realized that their cube had no chair, I think he looked my way and was like, "Hey, wait a minute,
Yeah.
who is that? Why is he sitting in my chair off to the side?"
I think you stole the sales director's chair, David. So
Yeah,
you know,
it was.
if their sales were down that day, I think they'll be blaming you. I got intimidated by those weights and I walked in.
He can't make calls standing up. So
And there was also a magical moment where somebody entered the door. It was almost like an episode of Friends or Seinfeld or something. A guy opened the door, and the guy that was doing the presentation just burst out laughing for an incredibly slightly overlong laugh, and it felt almost slightly sinister. It was obviously a private joke going on, but it was like they were having a lot of fun. And we joke here, but I mean they seem to be a very tight knit group. And this adding of AI powered intelligence on top of business data, there's a huge demand for this, and I think this could be one of those that we might have to watch closely from afar.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the name drops there with Databricks and Snowflake. He didn't like Snowflake very much, and that was the company he was targeting with his pitch. Who knows? Maybe TexQL will take over Snowflake one day. He wasn't very impressed with how much they were charging for stuff, was he?
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So the last company we'll briefly talk about was the seventh company of the IT press tour. It was Shade Inc. Now, as the creative of this trio, Neil, I know you're very artistic, etc. What did you think of Shade Inc.?
Well, I really like these guys. I mean, it's tackling one of the biggest pain points in creative production. You know, the chaos of file management. And David, I know you frequent the world of video and video editing a lot. And I think creatives and design teams are working on video or audio footage. They're often struggling with dozens of different tools. You know, we've got Dropbox, Frame.io, LucidLink, Box, WeTransfer, all handling different parts of the workflow. So essentially, files live everywhere. Permissions are completely unclear. Creative leads spend hours at times looking for assets rather than creating. And I think their CEO, Brandon, he came from an engineering and creative background. Those two worlds seem to collide for him. And I think his perspective shapes everything about the company. And ultimately, they seem to be creating what he calls a CRM for files, which is a single platform that combines storage, reviewing, collaboration, AI tagging, and streaming access all in one place. So instead of uploading footage to 8 different times across different tools, you just upload once and then Shade becomes your single source of truth across everything. And to be honest, I think the technology itself is pretty impressive as well, because it's not only does it support real-time file streaming, editors are able to open 4K and even 5K footage instantly without downloading. Now, we were staying in a hotel in New York, and I know me and you, David, had a nightmare with uploads, just trying to upload a 50, 60 meg file, never mind a 3 or 4 gig file. But and I think with the AI features built in, auto tagging, semantic search, facial recognition and stuff, I think it seemed to be offer a real game-changing thing there. And I think they've raised something like $5 million, got 94 paying customers so far, I got from my notes. But I think ultimately their goal is to become the next Dropbox, the next Google Drive, but for the AI era of creative work. And yeah, I was very impressed. But what did you think?
Yeah, I was impressed as well. Not only impressed, I found it interesting, even though it's not something on VMblog that I usually cover. It's not one of those focal point areas of coverage. I enjoyed it. It was a great presentation, and I think it's smart. I think what they're building is incredibly smart. I think we're going to see, I always go, whenever I go to a trade show and I visit different booths, I always try to walk away and go, which one of these booths won't be here in 12, 24 months, not because they ran out of money, but because somebody snagged it and, gobbled it up because of just great technology that they don't have the ability to build. And it's granted, Shade didn't sound like they were for sale,
Yeah.
especially right now. But again, extremely interesting. You mentioned the semantic search capability. They did a live demo with, like you said, 1080p, 4K, 5K video, where I think he typed in something like looking for people running around the lake. And it went out into the database of all the video files, and it's actually able to look in. They're tagged, and it pulled up extremely quickly all the videos that have people running around a lake. So yeah, I think for people into photography, assets, videography, all those companies, we both in New York and back in, Los Angeles, Hollywood, and California, all the way down to, I had asked, is there technology good for a small company that might be like influencers who are creating tens or hundreds of video files a day, a week, or whatever? And he said, yeah. And so their cost seemed pretty good. The one thing I like too is I don't have anything specific at the top of my mind, but I remembered the company has for open access to anyone. They have an online calculator. So if you're using all those tools that Neil mentioned already, like the Dropbox and Frame, if you're using all those tools, you could put it into their calculator, and basically it came back and showed, okay, if you don't recoup the money you're paying on all these disparate tools and just use our tool at Shade, here's the cost. It gives you, an accurate, cost figure. And I think if I remember, it was something like between 55 and 70% savings that you can realize. So yeah, hats off to those guys. Good presentation, interesting technology, and I was excited to see
It was a polished performance by young Brandon there, wasn't it? I mean, we worked out that their sales in the meeting, judging by the number of customers. Neil mentioned there was 94 customers there, and I think they gave a rough figure of how much each contract was worth. So we worked it out in the meeting that their sales at the moment were about $1.5 million at the moment, and he actually made the prediction that would be 10 million. That the target was $10 million for sales by the end of next year, and he was quite confident about that. He was confident in the technology. All right, he's a polished presenter. He's been around a bit, I think, in other areas, but this is his passion. But he was quite confident that the way the market is going, there is definitely room to actually grow sales that quickly. And who knows what the target will be at the end of 2027. So we'll see. So that's the seven. That's the seven company. Neil, you were saying?
Yeah, I was just going to add in there. I think all of us between us have seen so many storage presentations on the IT press tour, and one of the things that I walked away from this is that world is evolving now. It's no longer about where that file lives. It's about how easily people can find that file, collaborate on it, and repurpose it. So if they keep building at this pace, they could easily become the default operating system, especially if you're looking at creative teams that are scattered across, I don't know, New York, LA, UK, Philippines, and Europe. If they're all working off that same drive as if they're in one studio, I think, I see a very bright future for these guys.
Great. So there's the seven companies who met on the tour. We're already planning our next podcast for November. More will be revealed soon about that. And also to follow this one, there will be a special program. It all sounds very exciting, I know. I'm trying to cause a bit of intrigue here, but we will be speaking to a very special vendor who we've spoken about already, but more details will be revealed. So we're excited about, and hopefully you will be. You'll enjoy this podcast. I'm sure you'll enjoy the next couple, which are already in the making. So it only really remains for us to say our goodbyes for this second episode of Across the Tech Pond, to be closely followed by episode 3 and 4. So that's goodbye from me, Antony Savvas, and I'll be seeing you soon. And David and Neil, finish it off.
Well, for me, I would just say I've also been to GITEX Global. I think that deserves a mention just because I was blown away by the scale of this event. They call it the largest tech event in the world. And I thought, well, yeah, but is it really? It was 200,000 attendees, 6,800 tech exhibitors, 2,000 startups. When you compare that to the CES stats of 4,000 exhibitors and 1,400 startups. Huge event there. So I had a great time there. I'll be talking about that in future episodes, I'm sure. Next week, I'm over in Estonia for a cybersecurity event there, and I'll be reporting back from that. But more than anything, I look forward to chatting with you guys in a couple of weeks. Looking forward to it.
And David, you're off to KubeCon, I understand.
Yeah, I'll be, if anybody watching this is in Atlanta in 2 weeks, I believe, it'll be KubeCon North America. And I'm looking forward to that. KubeCon always does a really great show, and there are hundreds and hundreds of vendors. So I'll do my best to walk around and try to find new, interesting technology and see what folks are up to.
Yeah,
Tony,
one more point about is it GITEX, is it called? GTEX?
GITEX, yeah.
GITEX with a G, yeah. But I'm pleased they're looking out for you for holidays there, Neil. Because what was it? It was Dubai, the one you just been to, and I understand you're off to Egypt and Abu Dhabi with GITEX as well.
Yes, apparently they enjoyed working with me, so I'm going to be invited to a few more events next year. So watch out in 2026. But Tony, I know you're on the road a lot as well. Where are you? You've got a few events coming up.
Yeah, I'll be at IGEL next week. And I do have open text coming up in Nashville as well. But yeah, so we're all very busy. It's all very exciting. And once again, goodbye.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.